I'm here again with Nicole. Today, given his military experience, we're going to talk about my perennial, I keep saying favorite topic, but it's also a pretty morose topic, which is the Russia-Ukraine situation. We're going to kind of go a little bit through the history of what's already happened so that this episode can pretty much air almost any possible time. So in case, but we will probably talk about projections. So just for the audience to realize, and by the way, I never say this at the beginning, but please hit like and subscribe and notify, because I know you all are watching these videos because I'm getting tons of watch time, but we also need subscribers. So
don't just hit smash like. Don't just hit it, smash it.
Yeah.
Like really right. Smash it. You have frustrations. You are angry about things. Use this as an opportunity to smash things. Smash the like button.
That's right. Thank you, Nick. All right. So with that, we're going to talk about Russia-Ukraine. So in the very beginning, Nick and I talked a little bit about this for a long time before I even hit record, but I think we're going to rehash some of it. Nick had a fairly intriguing theory about why Putin attacked in the north, outside of Kyiv, and it wasn't quite the disaster that it appeared to be. Now, for the record, I think it was a disaster, but I don't think it was a disaster because Putin was an idiot. I think it was a disaster because Putin had, again, I'm not a Putin lover, but he had really, really bad intel information. But anyway, what is this tantalizing theory that I speak of, Nick?
The funny thing is, I've noticed I'm not a Putin lover, but has become the Trump says really mean things, but I sure do like that cheap gas. It's kind of
right.
Okay. So I can't believe anybody doesn't want to take this, but I think I'm going to go down in history. And again, I've been wrong before. I actually said after George W. Bush, I said, give him 20 years and he'll be considered a great president. And actually, it only took 10 years. But then he kind of outed himself.
Because the latest Republican candidate. Yeah, because the latest Republican president is literally the worst thing since Hitler. Every time, right? Remember when Mitt Romney was the worst thing since hey, the 1980s called. They went Russia back. Remember that one?
But everybody forgets how much hated Bush was. This village needs an idiot and endless war, and now we're like war. But my favorite thing is, I'm right about some things. I'm wrong about some things. But as I watched the initial days of the attack go down, and I saw what I considered a very bold move, which is to go through Chernobyl, I said, honestly, that is a Hannibal-esque move to go through an area that's sort of already been canalized by a nuclear meltdown. Canalization is when we try to direct the enemy to go a certain way so that we can kill them better. And I'd wondered if the Ukrainians had sat there and said, well, no one's going to go through Chernobyl. It's a holocaustic nuclear wasteland, and you're going to end up poisoned. And then the Russians are like, well, we used to throw waves of thousands of guys with no bullets into a meat grinder just to wear out German ammunition. And so we're going to do that. And I think there's an argument to be made that much of, if you give the Russians maybe more credit than you want to, they may still actually be pursuing that thing of well, let's just use up a bunch of men and equipment. Life is cheap for us. We don't care. And so I'm not going to go there, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to plant this flag. And then because I love discussion and comments and everything, let's argue about it on the internet. And you can call me wrong, but I'm going to say that the advance through Chernobyl will go down as one of the top 5 military maneuvers in history. Because what we're looking at, what is it? Are we 30 days out now? Is that what that anniversary just passed, or what was it? No, it was 100 days out.
100 days.
We're 100 days out. What do we see? Well, southern and eastern Ukraine are gone. Mariupol has collapsed. Will you accept that the Donbass is done? It's over?
It's still.
I know there was a new attack this morning.
Luhansk appears to be on the verge of collapse.
Right.
Donetsk still has some life, and the artillery, the American supplied artillery, is starting to shape the battle space. There's also been a limited counterattack near Kherson from the Ukrainians.
Right.
At the same time, the Russians have been relatively, like, the scale of their offensive keeps winnowing down. So in the very beginning, it was very grand. Putin, to his credit, saw that it wasn't working in the north, repositioned, wanted to do like the kind of large encirclement in the Donbass. That wasn't working. Kharkiv they were kind of ejected from Kharkiv. Then the Russians started doing the Severodonetsk encirclement, and what the latest I've read is they're advancing about a kilometer a day.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, frankly, is they're finally meeting with tactical success by limiting their aims, but they're steadily chipping away in that area. Now in Kherson, that was a bit of a surprise for the Russians, and they're kind of scrambling.
Yeah.
There.
Now,
so
remember,
that's kind of where we
stand,
right?
We as Americans, we all have to remember, like, we're trained for mass quantities right now and instant gratification. We are trained for shock and awesome. And all of that, as much as I am Army and you are Army, and we love to make fun of the Air Force and the DINFAC that they have, but you get your shock and awesome out of superior air power. And the United States has always benefited from that. So we're spoiled. I think if it would have been us, we would have rolled Ukraine in 3 days. Now, when they went through Chernobyl, I think what they were saying is the US will think that we are attempting to do shock and awesome and go for a kill shot on Kyiv. And so they said, let's march through Chernobyl. We don't care if everybody gets sick, as you pointed out to me. Then they started building defenses there, basically baiting the Ukrainians to attack it and fire artillery on it, knowing that they wouldn't, because, again, it's one of these weird locations that comes with issues. And it was a great exploit. There was once a battle between the Egyptians and I think it was the Hittites. And the Hittites figured out that the Egyptians worshipped cats, and they drove cats before them in this battle, and the Egyptians knelt and they just chopped off their heads. So it's a very weird little thing. I'd like to get together with the Russians afterwards and say, was this your plan or did you just get lucky?
Now, by the way, that just reminded me, I'm just throwing this out there because it's so freaky. The Iranians did something similar where they sent children ahead of the waves to the, like in the Iran-Iraq war, and they all had keys around their necks. And they would just send them, I mean, where they were like just yelling just talk about really creepy tactics. I know.
It's as you advance in technology and you get into UAVs and, smart weapons and all these kind of things, you have to, like, if I were going to go to the war college, I would say we do have to reacquaint ourselves with the tribalism and superstition and horror effects of a battlefield. It's not, when you're looking at a big screen and you're planning and you're running kill chains and everything like that, you're not seeing what's going on in the ground, and that things can change because of very jacked up shit like that. So my belief is that the Russians never intended to actually take Kyiv. What they did instead is they drove from the north as a feint. They were basically throwing a feint with their left, let's say, I'm using my right. And they were saying, we're going to convince the Americans, who are really actually running the Ukrainians, that we're going for a knockout blow. And then look, we're going to drive all these huge supply columns down this choked up road, and maybe they'll fly an A-10 in there and just have a heyday, and then we can basically declare a full out war. The Americans said, oh no, let's put a bunch of AT in there, which is also effectively. So they could have taken a junk army, driven it through a nuclear war zone, not really caring what's going to happen, nuclear fallout zone, and then basically lined it up. And then, so what a commander would have to do is say, like, okay, that's the attack. I'm shifting over to here. Everything's going over to here. What do we see 100 days later? Southern Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine, no matter what happens, are gone forever. They'll never be part of the Ukraine again. So even if the Russians say, hey, that's enough, we're done, no one's getting Southern or Eastern Ukraine. The Poles are getting ready to carve off their slice. So was it a bad plan, or was it a really great fake?
So I want to challenge you. But I want to learn. No. Well, I'll challenge you on the first part in a second. But that's you said the second thing you said was actually very tantalizing. We didn't talk about this. The Poles taking their slice. Because historically, that's I mean, Germany and Russia did their own thing to Poland like that.
Right.
And historically, Poland has also, and Russia have done sorts of things like that to Ukraine. And earlier on in a private discussion, you mentioned something about the 82nd Airborne in Poland. So I'm going to try to put this together, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. But are you suggesting that the 82nd Airborne is in Poland? I can say that for two reasons, which are completely the opposite of each other. One, to stop the Poles from moving in, or two, to declare Western Ukraine kind of like a East-West Germany sort of situation, and the Poles end up being the manpower to guarantee that. I'm guessing it's the second one, or maybe I missed it entirely.
You did. Now those will be the official reasons why they are there. The real reason is the United States fears a civil war, and they know that most of the military units and guard units will probably side with them. They're not convinced that the 82nd will. They're convinced that the 82nd and the Marines are a threat, which is why the Marines are currently on a Westpac, which they haven't been going on Westpacs much, and I could be wrong about that. Marines are on a Westpac until mid-November. Now that's interesting. Why mid-November? The 82nd is being held hostage in Poland so that they don't act up if things go sideways here in the late summer months leading up to the election. That is purely conjecture on my part. That is me just being a paranoid science fiction writer. That is me seeing an armed, surrounded, barricaded Washington, D.C. That is me seeing the left constantly talking about taking away people's guns and let's have a civil war now. All things that I do not want to have. But everybody can tell you, if there's one military unit that's not going to allow the Constitution to be overthrown, it's the 82nd. And it's also SOCOM, which they were worried about too. The Marines are in a fight for their own survival because all you can do is follow the sort of
Force 2030. Force 2030.
Exactly. They want to get rid of the Marines. Stuff, right. So if there really was a totalitarian, tyrannical government that is forming, that wants to do something new, and this may be controversial, I'm sorry, whatever. I don't think we're having elections this fall. I don't think we're having fair elections. You may have an election. I don't think it's going to be a fair election. I would love for somebody to prove me wrong and show me those things. I want to be wrong about all this. But can someone say to me this, or at least can you go this far with me? There is the possibility of the civil war right now. I don't want there to be. That's dumb. Mm-hmm. And if there is, you probably want all your units that you don't trust, OCONUS, outside the United States, as opposed to CONUS. My feeling is the 82nd Airborne is going to sit in Poland until mid-November.
Yeah. So
I can see I've lost you, but that's okay. That's okay.
No. Look, I
this will be my next military thriller novel. But if I'm
exactly.
If I'm right, I'd like to come back to this podcast.
Of course you'll come back. I'll talk to anybody, right? Sure. Like if Putin wanted to be on this podcast, I would talk to Putin, yeah. Right? I wouldn't agree with him, but I would talk to him. And the other thing too is you're a science fiction writer. You're going to come up with this stuff.
That's what I do.
Bain almost got canceled because people were just engaging in this sort of speculation on their what's the bulletin board site, like Bain's Bar, right?
Yeah.
And what would really happen is like some self-serving coward wanted to elevate himself in the publishing world, and tried to cancel an entire publishing company. The only one in, frankly, that genre that is ideologically diverse, to be clear. And failed, right? Because of the way it was handled. Because you could cancel Facebook for the exact same thing.
Sure.
But having these sorts of discussions, though, I think is useful because we'll know we'll know in November.
I hope everybody laughs at me and they're like, oh, he is the craziest, weirdest science fiction writer, but he's a good writer, or whatever. Unperson me. Don't buy my books. If I'm that wrong, believe me, I want to be wrong. I would hate to think that the 82nd is actually not. Do they have the 82nd all in their underwear with guns at them? No, you couldn't do that to those knuckle draggers. But can you put them on forever training detail saying, yeah, we're here to help keep the polls or whatever? But it's certainly that we're not going to take everybody's guns away and declare martial law over in the United States. And we know that you knuckle draggers will have opinions about that.
Okay. All right. So here's what I so I don't I don't hope to be proven. I hope to be proven right in this case because that's scary.
I can tell that you like the idea, though. It's attractive.
I think I would read that book. I would read that book. I think it's like it is so Machiavelli. Like, first of all, you're committing a mistake I often commit when I'm in corporations, which is not everyone is as smart. Not everyone is that smart. I was about to say it in a way that's made me sound much more arrogant, but like not everyone is that smart or that well-meaning. Keep in mind, this is the same crew that demanded that we only have 15,000 troops in Afghanistan, so we had to we couldn't withdraw from Bagram. Instead, we had to withdraw from Kabul, and it was an absolute shit show.
I have crazy thoughts on that one too.
Well, put that aside. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But look, these guys aren't that competent. They're just not. And not only that, for the most part, Americans are fat, dumb, and happy, right? Like, it's gonna take the government would literally have the government's literally fired on its own people at Waco, at Ruby Ridge. And there was a response, right, with Timothy McVeigh, but it didn't really, it didn't really, people didn't do anything because as dumb as governments can be, they're smart enough to isolate their
I would just like to say
this.
That I am a very happy, well-adjusted person, and my wife and I love each other, and we have no intentions of dying in a murder-suicide. So just that for the record. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's great elections on in November. I hope the 82nd Airborne comes home and all them hoochie mamas gets those guys and is everything. But I don't know. You just got. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the worst. But
no, you should certainly plan for the worst. But I don't think
if you were the deep state and you knew you were about to pull some shit, because can you honestly tell me that right now the Democrats have any kind of chance in November?
No, they don't.
You've got to stay in power to get to the CBDCs, which is digital.
What's the CBD?
Digital banking.
Yeah. So
you can't come okay. Let's do you believe this is the Obama's third term?
I mean, that's so rife with feelings and it's a continuation. It's a continuation. It's a continuation of similar policies. I would say.
Okay, yeah. Let's not say Obama.
An accurate way to say it.
There's an intelligence collective, and I just mean a group of minds that seem to have a clear goal. Now, can you take a chance that you get another Trump who's a disruptor, or you get the America First crowd, or everybody? So, look at the issues that have surfaced. They tried to do the abortion thing, and I don't know why. It's almost mid-June, and we still don't have a Supreme Court decision. They're trying to do the race war baiting again thing. There's about 2 other issues that they've tried. Now they're trying to do, and suddenly we have all these shootings. They're trying everything that they can to inflame their base, but it's never going to work because even here in California, are you in Northern California? Isn't Mendocino at $10 now? Is anybody concerned that they're adding extra digits to everybody's gas thing? There's no amount of racism. There's no amount of orange man bad. There's no amount of mean tweets that can overcome gas prices. So if you were that intelligent.
And by the way, grain prices, food prices are, they're already through the roof. They're going to be through the roof in the fall because of what Russia's done in Ukraine.
Something is up, but does the intelligence collective's plan involve, hey, let's create a disaster and then not get elected and make the Republicans take responsibility. That could be a real plan. Or are they so close to what they're doing that martial law, not having elections because of some sort of cyber attack or some sort of nuclear attack, prevents us from doing that, get them to that final step? If so, you don't want the 82nd around.
So I'm going to put my conspiracy hat on. I don't necessarily believe this. I don't necessarily believe this. Okay. But
all right.
Science fiction hat, science fiction thriller hat.
Yeah, that's how we get away with it. I'm not a conspiracy nut. I'm a science fiction writer.
Yeah. If there again, there's a lot of assumptions. If there is a permanent bureaucracy that controls more about what's going on in society than that is apparent on the surface, and I wanted to make sure that as part of that bureaucracy, that my plans and long-term ideations become reality. The way to do it is not the way that you're suggesting. The way to do it, again, purely intelligence world, right?
Sure.
Is to have an Epstein Island, right, where I compromise key figures on both sides of the aisle, right? So I think the Democrats are going to get shellacked, but I think the people who are going to win are either already, again, if I believe in the conspiracy, are either already compromised or are compromisable. Let's take it like a JD Vance, right? Sure. Yeah. Probably not compromised yet, but if you wanted to compromise them, you just have a very attractive journalist interview him, and then she roofies him. He wakes up naked in her bed, and there's pictures, right? Like, how do you explain that?
Well,
I didn't do it. Like, I was set up. I was set up. I swear to God, I was set up.
I think that they ran that operation in 2016, and it didn't work. They didn't go in on Hillary like they knew they should have. They thought she was going to win. Hell, I thought she was going to win. And then they said, okay, well, run in and compromise Trump and tell him we don't, obviously he's Trump. It's very hard to compromise him because his entire life has been compromised shit out in the open. And so they came in and they said, and Comey came in and they tried to trap him. And lo and behold, for some reason, with some weird ass reason that makes no sense about Donald Trump and his entire life, it didn't work. And then they put the hate on him, and the only place he had to go was conservatism. I don't think he would have gone. I think if they would have loved Trump or like,
because he's not a conservative. He's just not.
They unpersoned him and drove him right into our arms. But they tried that. They tried that whole thing. And so what I think we're at now is they can't take the chance that the compromised America firster isn't going to have a road to Damascus moment. Because that's what they're afraid of. I don't know. I probably tend to agree more with you that it'll just be new boss is the same old boss. It's just there are certain things that are concerning me. The supply chain weirdness, the food facilities breaking down, the baby formula stuff. Why are the Marines now on a Westpac? Well, Taiwan. Why is Biden seeming to want to provoke a war over Taiwan and just saying really weird stuff? Why are we in the Ukraine? Why is the 82nd in the Ukraine? The 82nd has been forward deployed now for probably 2.5 months, and they haven't done shit. They don't have any armor to support. They've got nothing.
So let's talk about something called the fundamental attribution error.
Sure.
Right. Never attribute to malice what could be due to either chance or incompetence. That's I didn't explain it quite well, but I think with Biden's comments on Taiwan, I think that was accidentally on purpose. And I think that just signals a policy change with China, which is you're kind of wearing down Taiwan's Air Force with this gray zone warfare where you're flying over and trying to exhaust their resources. If you think that we are focused entirely on Russia right now, and you think it's a good time to take Taiwan, think again.
Yeah.
And I think that's, in fact, there was an exercise. If you watch some of the briefings with Jack Kirby, we actually ran an exercise, I think down near the Strait of Taiwan, where we sent a flotilla through it just to say, oh, how many?
It was three. It was 2 U.S. carriers, 1 French carrier, or 1 Australian carrier, and the Japanese first carrier. So a lot of people will tell you.
So this was recent. This was
this was the recent one. We had was it an Indian carrier? It was 2 of ours, 1 of someone else's. But the big selling point was Japan's first carrier was going out,
which is good because like that is a psychological operation. Sure. Because for those who don't know too much about the history of World War II, like the rape of Nanking, the Chinese have a deep-seated, and the Koreans as well. I mean, they're like all like terrified of the Japanese samurai coming in and just doing what. And I think we need to, while kind of keeping our friends in South Korea, reassuring them, I think we need to be reminding the Chinese that, like, look, we may be across the horizon, but we are the only thing between you and a history, like, and the Japanese going back to their historical roots and becoming warriors again, because they are very effective warriors when they fight. And so I think part of it,
and their economy is not great right now.
Well, yeah, and that's their fault, right? Because they shut it down for COVID outbreak. But
the old saying
in terms
goes,
of what I think,
you're either trading or you're at war, and that's the thing everybody should be very concerned about. Especially the Chinese should be concerned about that with the Japanese. Trade, no war. War, no trade.
Yeah, and not only that, like China has a much bigger threat from its own internal population. Yeah. Right, they have the excess male problem, bare branches or whatever, what have you, and those sorts of countries are inherently unstable. Like China, and also has a history of peasant revolts and things like that. Yeah. And I think like the gears grind down on their economy. They're going to have massive internal. They've already had to deal with Hong Kong, Shanghai. They had a massive lockdown. They're going to have to deal with that. So they are highly vulnerable in that in those areas, and they need to be careful. But in terms of the 82nd Airborne, I think there's enough instability in the U.S. that any intelligent, if there is a secret, deep state cabal that controls everything, which there's, likely not. There's factions. There's always factions. But if there's some sort of faction that is worried about internal instability in the U.S., the last thing they would do is suspend elections, because that then you're going to get violence. Like, there's no doubt about it. Unless I think if they just do. But why? Like,
well, it gives you. Well, you bring in your foreign mercenaries, like we saw in Canada, that are wearing police and military uniforms, and they go out and get rid of everybody that you don't like under the guise of military operations. You've shut down the internet. You accidentally did lose a city when one of Putin's subs nuked Atlanta. It's really bad. Oh, that's just terrible. All these kinds of things. Like, I don't know. Like, yes. From a fictional standpoint, there are a lot of crazy things. But what we're seeing from China to Japan, just like you're talking about, is, and in the United States, we're seeing people reaching a revolt moment. I forget what the statistic was. It was something like, or what the metric was, but when 40% of your population can no longer earn enough money for food, you are in prime revolt territory. That's true of most of the world right now. It's actually becoming very true for the United States. People are going to revolt because they're pissed off and angry. If you shut everything down, and yes, there is an internet kill switch, certain military units are going to do the right thing. Some military units are going to do the wrong thing. If you're the power cabal, is there a deep state? Yes, there's a deep state. Are they fighting against each other? Yes. There's a mob. There are mob bosses. Just like in a Martin Scorsese flick, once you pull the heist, now you got to get rid of the rest of the mob. That's kind of what we're seeing, I think, in a lot of ways. is we're seeing, the honest truth is the one world government or the globalists, whatever you want to call it, they've actually won. They've won already. Now what they're doing is deciding who's going to be the winner between the mob bosses. They all work together on COVID. China, Japan, the United States, the royals, Europe, Putin, all of them have vaccines. All of them shut down the entire world. All of them shuffled the deck so that phenomenal wealth went to them and their friends. The middle class was destroyed. Africa and the Middle East are about to starve to death. A lot of problems, their problems, the problems of the eaters, were solved just by COVID, never mind the vaccine. But
well, one could make the argument certainly for the I mean, the intriguing thing about COVID, and again, I'm not saying this is the cause, is that countries like Japan, China, and the United States, but mostly Japan and China, have an aging demographic, a massive bulge that will take up, in the U.S. to a lesser extent with the retirement of the baby boomers. They're going to have this massive bulge that's going to consume resources. And who does COVID kill? Disproportionately people over 68 years old. Now, I think that's just a unhappy accident of history, but it's a great conspiracy. And the reason I don't think it's true is because the Chinese, it's like that's their biggest problem. Same with Japanese, and they've had exemplary COVID containment, procedures that prevented that from happening. So again, I think that's going back. I have to go all the way back though to pull. You keep throwing up these theories that I feel duty bound to not to oppose, but to.
No, I like
the back and forth. I like the back and forth
because
my
stuff to be attacked because one, I'm probably going to turn it into a novel,
right?
But I'm not someone who people bank their intelligence on their argument and their reputation, and if you don't agree with them, it's not. No, I'm wrong a lot. You should see me in my personal life. I'm constantly wrong. So I like my things shot to pieces. It's just I'm afraid that of the times that they might not. But I would say this, just one little identification. I keep coming up with things and you keep giving the benefit of the doubt that there's no ill intention. And that's fine. You can do that once. You can do it twice. But when you have to do it 10 times, when you constantly have to give the benefit of the doubt that there are no ill intentions, though there are constantly ill intentions, you might say to yourself, like, why am I doing so much work to give someone the benefit of the doubt? Maybe
because I've seen enough stupidity.
Yeah,
I've seen enough stupidity to kind of Now, don't get me wrong. Sure. Like you're 100% right that I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt on the malice side. I'm certainly not giving the benefit of the doubt on the stupidity side. However, out of like those 10, again, we're making up numbers, but those 10 instances where I'm giving somebody the benefit of the doubt or just blaming it on stupidity instead of malice, there's probably one or two, in my opinion, that I'm wrong on in the sense that where I'm attributing what happened.
If you're the manager of the grocery store and you come in and there's missing sandwiches from the deli case and missing liquor, and you keep saying, well, it's just a bad stocking thing. Like eventually you're going to find enough missing items to say there might be malice here.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
just
not malice, but
give yourself a number where you will stop giving the benefit of the doubt and say, these sons of bitches are up to something. I don't know what the number is or whatever, but it's maybe something I want to give the benefit of the doubt because, I worked for the government. You worked for the government. You work for the government and you don't really believe in the grand conspiracy. You believe that they can barely get a training schedule accomplished. And then that's a big leap too. Now we're going to.
By the way, you and I
weapons.
And by the way, you and I worked for the most efficient and effective arms of the government.
Yeah.
Right. And what we would see, like the trigger pullers are the most efficient, but then you look at the, not necessarily the logistical side, but like the back administration of the Army, and we're completely incompetent. Right. Like they took me, right. I graduated with an electrical engineering degree from one of the top universities in the world. And they're like, you tank. Yeah. And I'm glad they did it because I learned how to be a leader and things like that. But they wasted taxpayer dollars when they could have put me in some signals intelligence unit or, military intelligence unit where I could cyber security, something like that, where I could have used those skills.
The
But
Army
they didn't.
knows best.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad they did. I'm glad I was able to not only get an education on their dime, but also to get skills that I wouldn't have gotten if I had chosen where they would send me.
Right.
But
no, I'm just saying.
So I want to go.
We do a lot since COVID about giving the benefit of the doubt, and I'm fine for that. But how many times am I expected to just say, "Well, I guess they're incompetent"? Because there are people out there with dead families that kind of don't make any sense. And there are people out there whose businesses have been burned. And, we're always constantly told, well, I guess it's just this. I guess it's just that. It's like, after a while, I'm beginning to see a pattern from the government itself that doesn't seem to like us very much.
Well, part of it too
they seem more pro-Ukraine than us.
Yeah, there's also like collateral damage, right? Which is, so you have stupidity, you have incompetence, which is another shade of stupidity. You have malice, and then you have greed, which is where you see some collateral damage. It's not necessarily malice, but people are just pursuing things to help themselves, and there's collateral damage from that. And there's also problem solving, or let's just say covert problem solving, where there are winners and losers. And this is part of what we're saying. This is not a conspiracy theory. Well, it's just a theory, okay? In terms of like the dollar, okay, and the national debt, there are like three ways to solve that problem, okay? One is to stop spending or to spend less, okay, which neither administration has shown itself capable of. The second way to deal with it is to raise taxes to meet the funding, okay? Not popular at all, okay? What's the third way? You know what the third way is?
War.
What were we talking about earlier with gas prices and food prices and inflation?
Oh, inflation. Yes. Yeah. Then you can pay off.
So what inflation does, what inflation does is, by inflating the currency, which is, the Fed is purely independent, they can do this on their own, you in real terms reduce the amount of debt that you have to pay by inflating the currency.
Right.
And what that is it's like a stealth tax on the average American citizen. Now, is that, malice, or is it a way of solving a problem that is less transparent but more effective in moving the way you want to go, right? So these things aren't always black and white. They're not always malice, and they're not always stupidity. But in that specific case, that is exactly what is happening there.
Sure.
Okay.
But the twist might be this. How do all of them having government jobs, even our generals now, which in my day, I don't think generals did this shit, but all of them are multimillionaires now. Like, what's Nancy Pelosi?
And by the way, for the record, I don't think this is a new.
No.
I don't think this is new. I think this has been going on since at least the end of World War II, with the construction of what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, but possibly even before that.
But suddenly,
the difference now, the difference now is there's more information, independent information sources with the internet. That changed the game.
Right.
Back in the day, the regime could control, there's only 3 major stations. They could control the message that got out. And there was a common set of rules, or not rules, but there's a common set of quote unquote facts. Whether or not they were actually facts, who knows, right?
Right.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah.
But now this kind of throws, the internet and things like that has thrown everything topsy-turvy. There's also a lot of bad information on the internet too. It's completely, look, I'm not a QAnon guy, and I think that stuff's crazy, right? But I look, and I'm willing to admit I could be wrong. I doubt it, right? It's like the flat Earth types, like.
Well, here's what's happening is there are things that are absolutely insane that have happened. And then what you see that develops around those things is more craziness as they put up sort of, ECM, ECCM, basically trying to say, we didn't want you to see that thing. So here's 48 other things that make it look super crazy. And then what kind of seals the deal is when they come in and say, and anybody who believes this is nuts.
Is literally a Nazi, right?
And you're like, okay.
right.
But I'm just saying, like,
right.
It's not malice to inflate the debt unless, would it be malice if you ran up the debt and looted the country and now you want to cover up your crime by basically inflating the debt and making the taxpayer pay off what you looted? So if the debt is money that you looted, is it then malice? If you're
the one person who did it, yeah. But the thing is, it's been done over a number of generations.
I know. But
a certain political class.
But statistically, it's been done by one person. Like, if we look at all the people in the United States, it's almost statistically immeasurable the amount of people that have profited from running up the debt, but they have profited. And then you see the people who are advocating all the just really awful policies that seem to be like, there are times that I'm like, are the Democrats trying not to get elected by doing these things? Like, why are we having a third rail gun debate in an election year?
So again, conspiracy hat on, I don't believe this, but if I'm a really devious deep state cabal leader,
I think we're auditioning for the deep state. I think they're hearing this shit and they're like, those two are onto something.
I think the problem is like, I'd be really good at it.
Yeah.
Which is terrible. But like, if I were trying to avert a civil war, right, or reduce tension, I would absolutely make sure that the Democrats didn't win in the fall, in order to restore confidence in the electoral system, and to calm. Now you're gonna have the same people who burned the cities back in 2020 kind of come out, but that is the most effective and light touch way in order to calm things down, right? Anyway, that's.
Won't it be a surprise when the election, when the Democrats pull out not a bare margin, maybe a bare margin, but like, I mean, obviously there are doubts about the last election, whether it was fair or not. There are doubts, and there's some pretty effective arguments. If it happens again,
and that's what I'm not gonna touch that. Let's just say that there's enough suspicion frankly from both elections, right? From 2016 and 2020, that if everything that's going on right now, the Democrats still win, like we're done. Like people will.
I absolutely agree with you. Like, if there is a deep state,
and again, I'm not saying that as like because I want the Democrats to lose or anything like that. It's just like, it's the economy, stupid, right? It's a James Carville thing. It's the economy, stupid. If you have people who are seeing $10, and again, we're probably not there yet, but $10 gasoline prices and like a spike in energy and food prices and inflation, your party's not going to win, nor does it deserve to win.
No. But if it does happen, it would. If I was the deep state, like you said, I would really be trying to make sure that did not happen. But if it does happen, I can't say that it's an accident. I can say, and what I see in a lot of things is I see a push to have a civil war, and not by the side that I think would effectively win a civil war. I see a large group of people saying, we can do this because we think we have the military on our side and we're the Avengers like the Ukrainians, and we're well supplied and we have all the tech, and you just have AR-15s. You can't win a civil war with an AR-15, but we need to take your AR-15s away. It's like, I don't know. There's a lot of strange messaging, and I don't think it's all accidental. Or I guess I passed giving the benefit of the doubt, and I'm trying to figure out if there's an actual game plan. And that doesn't hurt me in any way, shape, or form. If I figure out the game plan, then I probably profit either by survival or actually investment. But if there isn't a game plan, then I'll just profit by writing a novel about it, and everybody, Netflix buys it because it's the next 24 or whatever.
But just talk to me first, because I'll find ways to like increase the verisimilitude of the of that sort of or like but this is what this country lacks right now, right? It's just like you came up with a bunch of theories, and I'm like, I don't know. Interesting, intriguing. I would buy that book, but I don't know. But like, it's a good back and forth where we're having this active discussion.
Yeah.
And like, there's no, like, you and I aren't taking it personally. We're just like, hey, you have this fact. Oh, that's interesting. That's actually really creative. Like, what about this? What about that? But to go back to why I think the 82nd Airborne is there. First of all, like those schedules are set years in advance about who's the like rapid reaction force, things like that, the 48 out, whatever. And second, I don't think they're going to, I think they're there as a deterrent so that if Putin decides to use a tac nuke, like we're involved. And I think with private channels that has been relayed, I don't know for sure, but that's what I would do. I'd be like, if you drop a freaking tactical nuke on a Ukrainian city or on the battlefield, we will in 2 weeks wipe out every Russian unit that's in Ukraine.
I would agree with you 100%. And then I've got to add my twist. If you really did want the American population to go to war with Russia, you would nuke the 82nd Airborne. But we don't do false flags in America, and those aren't taught.
Well, not nuke. I'm talking about like nuke someplace in Ukraine, right? Because that would be enough to get us involved.
But if you suddenly had a bunch of dead forward deployed 82nd Airborne that got nuked, every American, we would actually stop our fighting, and we would go to war with Russia. But in the
now you raise an intriguing point, right?
Yeah, in the United States, we don't do false flags.
Since the very beginning of this whole thing, the one thing that I've been saying is that I got to be careful about how I say this, because I don't like war is terrible, and what's happening to Ukraine is absolutely awful.
Horrible. Yeah.
But if there is one thing that could like reunite the country, it is a war with Russia
or China. They would also accept China.
Yeah.
But you have to.
I would be all in. I would be all in. I'm sure you would be all in, and it would actually. Well, maybe I don't know.
But it doesn't work for the reasons that they want it to work, which is to save the economy. Where you literally go to the people like leaders for 10,000 years ago and say, "Hey, we got to go take those guys' grain and stuff. We got to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to survive winter." You have to have an emotional touchstone. You have to have a 9/11. I'm not saying 9/11 was a false flag. There are people who say that it is. I'm not saying the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag. I'm not saying that, all these things, but my biggest fear right now is someone's going to die so that we have a reason to.
Well, wasn't the Gulf of Tonkin, I think it's widely acknowledged it was a false flag, isn't it?
We don't do false flags, even though they're taught at the JFK Warfare School of Warfare.
No, we absolutely absolutely.
So you're sitting in the room.
It's actually called strategic. It's actually called strategic deception. Like we do that stuff.
Yeah. I know. I'm being arch, but you're sitting in the room, and what you just said to me, if the White House were legitimately like, this nation is fracturing, and that's far worse than a lot of things that could happen to us. I mean, like, people don't understand the concept of a fracture, a balkanization. It's, I've been to the third world. It will not be fun. This is the worst thing I'm going to say in this podcast. If you really did want to save the nation, you would do that. You would create a cause so that we would not end up killing each other on Main Street, which we're about to do.
So, I wouldn't go. Again, I think Americans are lazier than you're giving us credit for. Like, we have
but suddenly you have all kinds
as fractured as things are. Things are pretty fat and happy. Like,
sure,
but and the other thing too, to your point, people who've been deployed to like Bosnia and things like that, where you have these sorts of things. First of all, they spiral out of control very quickly, and then second, they're very difficult to unwind once it happens. And people who've been to war, and I haven't, right? But will tell you that, like, I know you're revved up, and I know, like, it's really you're ready for that, but you're not really ready. Like,
no, we just all lived through 20 some odd years of terror and fear, war on terror and stuff like that. So
which was nothing
compared to
it's not even 1% of what something like that.
We're seeing what a real war. I'm not going to say that. We're seeing what happens when Russian artillery gets involved in, and people who don't have the fundamentals of Western civilization. It becomes very barbaric. But people have to remember, the Russians learned this shit from the Mongols. And the Mongols were absolutely awful. You're in a caravan, you've left Jerusalem, you're winding out through there, the Gobi Desert, you come to a city, and they've stacked everyone's skull in front of the city. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. Just the Mongols.
But don't they believe he killed, Genghis Khan reduced Earth's population by 10%, something like that?
1 in 6 Chinese males is related genetically to Genghis Khan. So you would have to kill a lot and some other stuff, a lot. It's a very wild, interesting time. Let's update. I'll come back and everybody can laugh at me and say the paranoid science fiction writer was wrong. Or they can say, why doesn't the channel work? The internet's off. And
yeah, exactly. I was about to say, like, if you're right, we're not coming back, Nick.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. So where were we with Russia? So the one point I want to say about Russia is, on the feint. I think it was kind of a Potemkin village offensive on purpose, but it was to just come in. I shouldn't say Potemkin. I think he wasn't trying to capture Kyiv.
No,
never trying to capture it. He was trying to effect a lightning strike where he had Spetsnaz, Wagner Group operators going in there. They had kill lists, kind of like we have. I still have the deck of cards, the Saddam deck of cards, like the 50 key leaders. So they're going to go in and find those people, and the reason I believe that is, we were talking about this off camera before, with the the VDV, right? Like the Russian paratroopers, who were like literally shot out of the sky before they had a chance to deploy at what's the name of the Gostomel airport, right? Because that was the plan, was to kind of seize that airport and then use that as a forward deployed base to unload everything. They also went through Chernobyl. They wanted to get around that river, but the goal was to put pressure. I think it was actually a feint in reverse. I think the main feint was actually in the east, to suck up Ukrainian military resources so that they freed the north, could end it quickly, have effected change at that level, and then Putin no longer had to put any more resources in the country. He just changes the leadership, installs a puppet. Hey, special military operation is done. We pull back. But I think what his GRU and FSB was telling him was that, oh yeah, we got these guys to fold. They're gonna, and some of it worked. I think in Kherson it did, right, where one of the bridges was left intact. They could go in, but it failed. So Putin focused again on the Donbass. But the one thing that he's doing that's smart, and that people are only just beginning to get wise to, is he's reinforcing success, which is basically the Russian way of war for the last 100 years, right? You just flood the entire battle space, and anywhere you have a point of penetration, you just shove everything through. And he had most of his success in the south, mainly because of it's drier. They were able to influence more people. But the reason that it is increasingly critical there is because he can shut off Ukrainian trade through the Black Sea. And not only is it going to create a humanitarian crisis for the Ukrainians, it's going to create a humanitarian crisis for the rest of the world. At the same time, energy prices are going to start to come up as it gets colder in Ukraine, Germany, and the sanctions regime is going to start to wobble a little bit. And the thing that Putin has on us, and I just had I don't know when it's going to air. It'll air it sometime soon. But Dr. Sean McFate was on this, and he teaches at the National Defense University. And the point that he made is that if you look at like an inverted triangle, okay, and you have like 3 levels of the military operation, military art, right? You have tactics, operations, strategy. On tactics, the Chinese and the Russians suck, and we saw how badly they sucked from Ukraine. Chinese are probably pretty similar. They're a little bit better at operations, though, right? Like they're good at planning a little bit larger. They might not have a great NCO core, but they're a little bit better at operations. But at strategy, they are superior, frankly, to the U.S. in a number of ways. And the reason they are, I'll get back to that. But if I go back to the U.S., we're a triangle. Okay, tactics. You put like a U.S. military mercenary in some like as a mercenary or whatever, they will change the performance of that unit, right? Especially an NCO who's been to combat, things like that. Operationally, also we're excellent. Not as great as we are at tactics, but we're superior to the Russian and Chinese model. But strategy, we're this tiny triangle at the top, and the reason we are is that the people setting strategy are people who've been in the military, either people who've been in the military for 30 years who are good at just getting shit done, but don't necessarily haven't quite developed that type of thinking, especially since they're not really setting strategy. They're just taking orders. Now, the people who set strategy are even worse. They're politicians who, in most cases, are probably sub-100 IQ people. Don't understand anything at all. Maybe if they're slightly above 100 IQ people, they don't think long term because they're thinking to the next election. And the people they install in these positions, again, to rehash some of the things that Sean McFate said, is that the person who gets to be Deputy Secretary of Defense for policy are sometimes academics who could be very good especially if they focused in that area for their entire careers. So I had a mentor who was very good at that stuff, and ultimately had held up fairly high position. But most of them aren't that way. They're people who are like advanced men or advanced women, right, on a political campaign, where they're like, okay, the next town is Sheboygan. Let's make sure that he has his Pop-Tarts. And, let's make sure he talks to the mayor and, this, and then like he shakes hand with the baby here, kisses a baby here. And then next thing you know, this motherfucker is writing, grand strategy for the next 30 years in China. We're not going to be good at it. We're just not. We're going to be terrible. And that's what worries me, because Putin, it may have been a debacle thus far, but he's already thinking ahead to the fall. He's just like, all I got to do is choke these guys out, and it'll be a frozen conflict. And then over the next decade, I can just shape the population so that I can replace the leadership with some, leadership that's more amenable to reunification with the motherland, this and that. And like the first stage is this. And what drives me nuts is, why is nobody in the mainstream media talking about a convoy? Like, we're going to have a massive humanitarian, and we talked about this kind of offline, I think. Or you have the conspiracy theory behind that. But I really don't. I don't think our policymakers right now are that smart. I don't like. Here's what I would do. I would say, hey, let's get a third party. And we, again, like Sean McFate and I came up with this just on a call just like this. Why don't we just get an aspiring power or two of them that has kind of some bit of a navy and is not a party to the conflict. So let's say you get India, which is slightly tainted on the Russian side, and let's take Japan, it's slightly tainted on the US side, and have those guys escort grain shipments from both Ukraine and Russia. Like, hey, white flag, we just want to make sure the grain gets to its markets. What's the problem? You don't have a problem with that, Russia? And Russia, of course, says yes. Then it's just like, okay, well, the U.S. comes in, we'll start sinking your fleet. Well, but nobody's even gaming this. We're not even talking about this. It's driving me nuts.
And that's, as you know, in intelligence, when you don't know where something's at, that's probably where if there's a blank space on your map, something's probably going on there. So I would say grain is about to become very important. It's very important. It's about to become very important. So why wouldn't Russia just take all that grain?
They already are.
I know. So they don't want anybody in there. They're taking the grain, and we're about to see a lot of other crazy things. But let's come back in a month or whatever and talk about it and see. But
yeah, I know. I
keep
you on here
with
forever.
Everything that you said. I absolutely hope they're incompetent and clueless, and this is just a series of bad mistakes that I can assign low-level IQ and intelligence, all these awful, rotten things to. Because if I'm right, and the side effects are the intended effects, this is horrifying. This is Nazi Germany level, on crack, with the resources to get shit done level stuff, where they're literally looking at groups of people and saying, well, your time's done, you're dead, we're not feeding you, you're dead, let's wipe out this population. I mean, it's, I really hope they're not that smart. But have me back, please. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I also don't think they're that evil either, but, you know, we'll see.
There's no such thing as good and evil in their circles. There's just winners and losers. Good and evil are, you know, it's like, remember, this is a group of people that don't believe there's such a thing as a mind. They believe there's a brain, but they don't believe there's a mind. It's little subtle things, but no, they don't believe in good or evil. Those are concepts for your pastor.
All right, my friend.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
All right. I'll be back, and I'll be wrong. Let me be wrong.
I hope you're wrong, man. I hope you're wrong, brother.
I really do.
All right. Always a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.